Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down as softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back, and every day he wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And TheTaraReade came out to say the man they tried to label the Messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't going to make us any...
Legend says that Hercules swept Cerberus right off his feet and effortlessly set him down softly as a songbird. Atlas kept the world upon his back and every day wondered whether he could stand it any longer. And TheTaraReade came out to say the man they tried to label the Messiah of morality was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer. And knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers. And knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character. That his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no one wants to really know the person they've so valiantly defended, even when it meant they had to gloat and shit all over someone braver than they'd be if given the occasion. Now cue the faceless comment squad invasion. Cue those fuckers crawling out the woodwork to come analyze the way you wore your hair and what you wear. Like your appearance waives your rights, or that somehow you're the reason for your situation. Somehow they've decided you should bear responsibility for what such monstrous men insist on doing. Somehow they're deluded by the empty, hypocritical, and useless fucking platitudes that bastard keeps on spewing. And I think it's very telling that the best of their excuses when they try to come and justify our president's abuses is a hearty butt Trump. In which case I'll...
Welcome, everyone, to the Politics to Survival. I'm your host, TheTaraReade. And yes, I'm still in Moscow, Russia. Yes, I still love it. And in fact, I have a factoid for you. Apparently, as far as cost of living, according to 2023 results, it is 169% more expensive in America than in Russia. So that's how those sanctions are doing. Anyway, I'm doing very well. I started a radio show. If you guys want to catch it, it's the TaraReade Show. Chris Ems was doing it with me, but he got called away because he's really a business person. And so he was working full time and he was unable to carry that on. I'm really having a good time on TNT Radio. They're awesome people, awesome group of folks. It's out of Australia, and it gets it's kind of fun to do radio. I think they want to do a little video as well, but we'll see. I kind of enjoy not having to do hair and makeup, but oh well. That's going to end soon, and I'm going to have to. So check out TNT. You can find it on Podbeam. There's some great hosts like Misty Winston. If you've watched her show, Misty is like just superb. And I've been on her show a couple of times, and I hope to have her on this show soon because it's been a while since I've had her on and whatnot. And, so that's what's been going on. So I'm Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Moscow time. And that would be 9 a.m. Eastern time. And I won't even say Pacific because you guys probably, unless you're like getting ready for work at 6 a.m. and listening, I'm not sure. You'll have to listen to the playback. But hey, you could wake up to my voice, right? So join me on that, and I will have the particulars on my Substack pretty soon, and you can listen to some of the other shows that I just recently had. We have a lot going on in the news. I think one of the most sobering things that just happened is the special counsel was appointed in the Hunter Biden case because the plea deal fell through. And I think, Reef, you have like something to post up there about that. But basically, the special counsel is kind of a do-nothing dude. And there's a lot of criticism from the right that he's not going to be very zealous. And we'll actually get into talking a little bit about that, the corruption in general, with our next guest that we have coming on here in a minute. But it's deplorable. I mean, it's awful what you're seeing. 50 million was found being embezzled, basically, or using pay to play. Joe Biden being the product, when he was vice president, and this bribery scheme. But the latest is 20 million more. So that brings it up to 70 million out of Ukraine, Romania, and it's ridiculous. So imagine the audacity of asking for more money for Ukraine, right? Well, they did. And I know Reef has this ready to go, but we just had a tragedy in Maui where an entire town, which I'm sure you saw, was almost leveled. And now they're saying there's 56 confirmed dead, but they're saying 1,000 people are missing. People were jumping into the sea. And it looked apparently like a war zone. Somebody had filmed it from an airplane. And, it's a devastating to that whole town, a very historic town there on the island of Maui. And unfortunately, Joe Biden, instead of going there or talking about that or doing anything to help Maui, I think they've released at least federal disaster funds. But instead, they're going to give $24 billion more to Ukraine. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the money laundering continues. And I have someone who can really talk to this about just where we are as a country and the corruption and the level of it, because she knows it inside and out, the lack of election integrity. I've had her on the show before, and I love having conversations with her. She just recently held an event called Humanity for Peace. And I am really honored to have my friend and person whom I admire so much, the person running for U.S. Senate in New York, Diane Sare. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Tara. Thank you so much. That's a very kind introduction, and the feelings are likewise. I was so happy to meet you at the Rage Against the War Machine when you were still here in the U.S.
Yes. I know. I miss our Italian restaurant spot. Do you guys
Yes.
go with me? Okay. We'll lift a glass of wine.
Yes.
That was a great spot.
Yeah, it was. And he always asks about you.
It's a secret. I don't want anyone to know our spot.
Right now.
It's a secret Italian spot. And in New York, that's going to put there's a lot of secret Italian restaurants. So,
right.
Yeah. So, Diane, you have been fighting the fight for decades. And I just wanted to bring you on the show to kind of talk to you. I mean, I'm here, like I said, 6,000 miles away, but I'm still writing, I'm still blogging, I'm still, on radio and on this show, trying to raise awareness about the corruption of the Biden regime. What are some of your thoughts of some of the news that you're seeing and the earmarked 24 billion for Ukraine?
Well, I mean, they certainly are corrupt. It's a criminal family, as we see, but as we've also been discussing recently, it's obviously not just Biden. I mean, people see the guy, he can't walk on the stage, he doesn't know where he is. His son was a drug addict. They're, in a sense, the tip of the iceberg of a terrible problem of what's happened to the United States. I experienced it directly as a young organizer with Lyndon LaRouche, who was a real American patriot in what used to be called the American intellectual tradition that Henry Kissinger expressed his great hatred of, where all of the publications of LaRouche were shut down. People were given lengthy jail sentences. And what does this come after? The assassinations in the 1960s of President John F. Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, who was likely to have become president, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and not just assassinations in the US, Patrice Lumumba in Africa, right? So in a sense, what you've had is a cabal led out of the city of London and Wall Street who think they should run the world, a certain order, and they've managed to get a great deal of control. But the problem they have now is they're losing control. That exactly as LaRouche called for way back in 1976, when he proposed an international development bank to do the job that FDR's intended Bretton Woods was to have done. The IMF and World Bank were not supposed to be colonial institutions. They were supposed to level the playing field after World War II so that every single nation would have its independence. And not in name, but with their own economy, their own machine tool, food self-sufficiency, that kind of thing. Well, now, because the Anglo-American elites are so horribly corrupt, I mean, what would you do? You could be an ally of the United States and we could blow up your pipeline, shut down your food production, stick our fingers in your eyes, kick you in the balls. That's one kind of alliance. Or you could work with China and Russia and have new power plants, new deep water ports, high-speed rail, fertilizer, free grain. I mean, it's not really a hard choice. So it shouldn't be so hard to figure out why 140 nations are now working with the Belt and Road Initiative, why 40 nations want to join the BRICS, and why people are becoming more and more emboldened to buck the so-called rules-based order of the United States. I think we're in an amazing turning point, which is very dangerous as well. And so in a sense, it's not the Biden family per se. They're the visible manifestation. They're like the blackhead at the top of the pimple, to use an ugly analogy. But there's something much more that we have to get at, and we really have to change the culture, and the American people have to change what they're willing to put up with, frankly.
America needs a facial, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I always see that joke meme about, can we turn America off and then turn it back on and see if we can, get it going again. But I don't think, again, and you've talked about the history of America when it's steeped, unfortunately, with violence and with colonialism and imperialism, and with that kind of karmic past, with that kind of deep kind of divide, if you will, of class as well. It's hard. And what's happened is we've gone into crony capitalism, and crony capitalism is not a fun thing to live through. Plus, you heard me at the top of the hour talk about about the cost of living and how it's 169% more expensive to live in America than Russia. Believe me, Diane, I notice it because I'm working for, TNT, right, which is a normal wage. It goes so much further, right? I work for RT as well, and as a contributor. And again, it's night and day. I didn't even realize it's kind of like you're a frog in boiling water, and then you get out and you're like, whoa, okay, I didn't realize
Right.
it was bad.
No,
And it is.
exactly. That's,
Yeah.
I think, look, people's demands are too low. They just want to not have their property taxes get increased or something, as opposed to thinking the way we really should be living. But I want to go back because I actually think I disagree with something you said about the United States. And I think it's a really good point of discussion. And I'm really glad that you said it, which is that our past was not colonial. In other words, the whole point of the American Revolution was to end empire. And the founding fathers, by and large, whether it's Ben Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Gouverneur Morris, John Jay, also were vehemently opposed to slavery. Our nation was not built on slavery because you can't, it's a dead end.
But Diane, look what we did to the Native Americans.
The Jesuits, look, the intent of the people I just named was schools, integration, literacy, the Cherokee language, the written language, and then you had Andrew Jackson, right, a total British agent who did the Trail of Tears. So in other words, there was a real intent also to get rid of slavery. People knew that it would have to come to a head, and the British and others, I just read a fascinating paper on their efforts to massively ship slaves here, particularly to North Carolina, as a way of creating a kind of dependence on this and perverting, destroying our ability to represent what we should have been representing, which was the intention, if you go back to Leibniz or Joan of Arc, or really where it goes back to. So you're living in a world dominated by empire, dominated by the British Empire, and people say, no, man is dignified, man is worthy of self-government. Someone that I just did a symposium with had letters from Alexander Hamilton, one letter where he said the intelligence of the Negro is equal to ours. That was his firm belief. And he vehemently opposed slavery, but we couldn't, it was complex to get out from under it. And there was always an internal fight of these Brahmin imperial, like Boston, they got a huge foothold in Boston, this treason faction, and in the South. And then we had the so-called Civil War, which in effect really wasn't a civil war. It was like a continuation of the American Revolution with Lincoln and his, the people who wanted a republic and the people who wanted us to be a colony and continue just producing cotton and raw materials. So in that sense, if you look at the leadership our nation has produced, people who had that intention, Lincoln, John Quincy Adams, Martin Luther King, who was a real American, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, right? There's that. And then there is this treason, what I would call a treason faction. I suppose Andrew Jackson considered himself American. I consider him a traitor, right? And unfortunately today, people don't read original documents. I've met very few people who've read Alexander Hamilton's papers, or who have a real sense of the kind of battles going on in our republic, who know the background of Aaron Burr and what went on between him and Hamilton, really. How did Aaron Burr become vice president? And we were just talking today with actually an official, former elected official in New York, about Aaron Burr and his fake water company, which became Chase Bank. I mean, it's so much like exactly the fight that's going on today. And I think if our young people had a better sense of the total drama, they could recognize what they have to be fighting for now. Are you a Tory? Are you for the British imperialist system? Or are you a revolutionary? The idea that really all people are created equal, and we have to have a nation based on that, and our relationship to the world has to be based on that. That famous quote from Kennedy's first inaugural, which everyone doesn't say the whole thing, which is not, don't ask what your nation can do for you, but what you can do for your nation, and what we together, and he said, don't ask what America can do for you, but ask what we together can do for mankind.
Mm-hmm.
That's somehow, no, yes, we're responsible for what happens to the human race. And yes, we do have to take a large share of responsibility. That's why I joined LaRouche, because I realized as an American citizen, we have so much power. We are so responsible for what happens in the world that if horrible things happen, we have to own up and say that we're responsible for that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I really like it. And I just wanted to thank on Rofken, we just got it says AREM, so I don't have the proper name. It just says A and then REM, gave a $50 tip. Thank you so much. And I think I'd like to dedicate that tip to Reef, my producer, because he does so much work, and he has literally been now for over a year helping me and dealing with time zones. And anyway, I love you, Reef. So that's going to go to you. Okay. And thank you for all of you that are supporting independent media and INN, Independent News Network. Reef actually has his own show. Reef, could you tell us the show that you have?
INN News Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern. So check that out.
Cool. And you and Colin do that together, right? And you go over the news and do funny stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very insightful stuff. Yeah, so thank you. And then Reef, did you have some questions before because I was gonna show one of Diane's interventions, because I love the way she shakes up the elites. But before we do that, do you have any questions or comments? Because we have a live feed going on for Diane.
Not quite yet. People are wandering in.
Okay.
When they do,
wandering in. All right, come on, you guys. Let's wake up. I know it's in the afternoon there, probably nap time. But for me, I'm like getting ready. It's late. So ask Diane anything you want, and if she won't answer, I will.
Good, that's
she
fair.
most likely will answer.
Fair division of labor.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. So Reef, could you show, go ahead and play one of Diane's interventions. I think you can see the screen, right, Diane? What he's going to show?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, perfect. Go ahead and play that, Reef. Thanks.
List that you are concerned that are being targeted by Ukrainians is not what you think it is. And so I just assure you, Americans are not being targeted by Ukrainians. If they were, our FBI, our CIA, and our DOD would protect American citizens. They will not allow American citizens to be targeted by a foreign country, no matter.
Sorry, Senator. I am Diane Sare. I am on that hit list.
I know you are.
And Scott Ritter is on that hit list. People on it have been attacked and killed. I got a package today in the mail that had rattling noises in it that said something about Ukraine, and I had to call the police because I didn't know what was in it. They are killing people. Amnesty International admitted that it's the Ukrainian army using civilians as human shields. And you and 99 other senators voted unanimously to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, which means that all diplomatic channels with another nuclear power are cut. I think that is highly irresponsible. I will hear what you have to say. I hope you are not of the opinion from that idiotic public service announcement put out by the city of New York that we can survive a nuclear war by closing our windows and listening to the radio. And I do want a better answer because the State Department is funding it. I've been on the website for the Center for Countering Disinformation, which has my name on the list and says I am an information terrorist who should be charged with war crimes. And that does put me in danger.
Okay, listen, so I'm aware of the list. I understand your concern. If you believe you are threatened, either one of you, by Russians or Ukrainians, We will get you, we will get you the number to report that to the FBI, and we will follow up on your reports. You should not feel to be at risk or to be targeted, and I will help you get more security.
Comments, Diane?
Oh yeah, I'm going to call the FBI to protect
the FBI
yeah.
is just there for us. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Great. Yeah, and what you don't quite hear, because what she was saying was that the kill list was Russian disinformation. That they made it up, even though you have Russian journalists like Daria Dugina getting blown up in car bombs and things. Yeah.
And the blogger that was very beloved, who basically was handed a trophy or something and was bombed.
Yes.
And blown. I mean, there's been several journalists killed. There's children. There's 337 children on that kill list. And I've talked to one of them. I've met her in person, and you know, she's only 14 years old, and they have her on a kill list. It's disgusting. And by the way, on the Mirovitz site, it says Langley, Virginia. So it's implying that it has support of the U.S. Pentagon or the government, the DOJ and CIA. And you know what? I wonder if it does, because it doxes people. So it doesn't just like talk about killing them. It also talks about doxing them. And then when someone is killed, it puts liquidated in Ukrainian across it. It's disgusting. And, you know, I'm really glad. That's one of my favorite interventions that you did. Frankly, I just thought it was so powerful, and I must have watched it like 20 times, and you were so graceful in the way you presented it and clear. Have you gotten any other threats since then, or has that subsided a bit, or are you still having to be on guard?
Well, since, you know, after this intervention, interestingly enough, my name disappeared from the Center for Countering Disinformation list. Mm-hmm. Perhaps Gillibrand intervened, although the U.S. has nothing to do with the list. Can't have it both ways.
Right.
I don't consider that makes me safer. I think it gives them plausible deniability. And as a person running for public office, you know, there's been plenty of attacks against people, whether they're from Ukrainians or not. So I don't particularly feel safer. And I think as the stakes get higher and the need to continue this fake narrative about Ukraine winning, which they're beginning to give up on now a little bit, I think the danger is greater. I think anyone telling the truth right now about this in particular, which is a very, very hot topic, very important to Biden's reelection, there's always some risk.
Yeah, I mean, Wyatt Reade, the journalist, is on that list, and his hotel was bombed, and he was 2 minutes away from it. Going back to it, I'm on that list, obviously,
right.
And Igor Lopotnik, Oliver Stone, Roger Waters is on that list. But they dox, and the young girl that I talked to, it gave her address, and she's 14 years old, right. And someone showed up at her house, actually, and they ended up being okay. But how frightening for her parents. And what a state of world where basically Ukrainians seem to be free to just do terrorist acts on civilians of different, you know, in the Donbass region, and target their own, you know, civilians, as well as, you know, other foreigners that they deem an enemy to their Kiev regime. And they're Nazis. I mean, let's just not put words. I'm tired of hearing it being disinformation. How many pictures do we have to see of the Ukrainian soldiers with Nazi emblems on their shoulder? How many
times? We saw the Associated Press article, or was it the New York Times, where they admitted, they said, well, we do ask people to cover over their swastikas. Could you please cover your swastika so we can take a picture?
Yeah, exactly.
They admitted that they're doing that. Right.
We know you're a Nazi, but like low key, could you pretend like not?
Right.
And then, you know, it's like, you know, it's amazing how they're trying to like whitewash Bandera's history, who is a murderer and a genocidal maniac, and who was in lockstep with Hitler. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get how American taxpayers are not just enraged that our money is going to Azov Nazis, basically, who were 12%, by the way, of the Kiev regime parliament, 12%.
Right.
And now
Right.
our money is all supporting that whole parliament and their
Sure.
villas.
And what people have to think about, I mean, there's all kinds of studies about toxic workplaces and so on, because everyone knows when you have someone who's really evil or really nasty or scary, they're not the majority. One person creates an entire dynamic. And I think, I forget which one of these people it was who talked about the Maidan, saying we were 8%. We were 8%, but we were the key to the Maidan coup.
They were armed.
Succeeding. Yeah, and they were Nazis, so they had no compunction about doing horrible things to people and manipulating people through terror, which is what they do.
Yeah, and you can see that with the NAFO trolls online, on Twitter, even the things that just 2 days ago, I was threatened that they were going to drop a drone on me, like that's the kind of language they use on Twitter. And you know what? I reported it, Diane, and guess what? They said they had a drone with a picture of my name on it, a drone for me to kill me, right? And so I reported it, which one does, as a death threat, to Twitter, and to have it taken down. Twitter wrote back, didn't violate any policies.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, very selective. It's part of the rules-based order. We make up the rules. Yeah.
Yeah. So with your interventions, have you found them effective? And if so, how have they impacted your campaign and your message?
Yes. I mean, the biggest effect perhaps is the wide circulation of things like this on social media, but also when you're there in the room, you find the ones and the twos who agree with you. They may not have had the courage to speak out, or maybe after you speak out, then they start speaking out. So I find that the courage to tell the truth in the face of these lies inspires other people to tell the truth. And that's probably the most important aspect of it, because we got to shatter this, echo chamber where they can assume that everyone goes along with this crap when everybody doesn't.
Right. And I think we saw that yesterday. CNN had to stop an interview because they were interviewing a bunch of Iowans who basically just shut down the reporter and said they didn't want any more money going to Ukraine, and they thought it was a money laundering operation for Biden. And the reporter literally cut it off. And there was 10 people from Iowa who just were like, "Oh, we don't." Yeah.
Well, was it NBC who sent a reporter to Crimea and discovered that everyone thought they were part of Russia?
Yeah.
That they had been born in Russia and they still,
and what people need to understand too, that are watching, if you look at Crimea, it had 80 to 90%, right? They did have voting integrity. They had international observers. It was a valid voting when it happened, and 80 to 90% still are in favor of being with the Russian government. And some of the reasoning is they have infrastructure, they have pensions, they have medical, they have education. It's a very, and plus they're Russian nationals by virtue of that. And the Kiev regime, on the other hand, which isn't a democracy and isn't even a real nation, they are basically have all the money goes to basically about 10 oligarchs that run around Europe with their villas, and they pocket the money and deal with Americans and gun runners. And basically they're just in a money laundering scheme that's taken the whole world to the edge of World War III.
Right. Now, speaking of that, I really want to give a shout out to Scott Ritter's documentary on Zelensky. Have you seen those two movies? Yes. They're really excellent, and people should watch them because you get a sense how this guy was created. And I think he has a gigantic mansion in Crimea. That may be one of the reasons why he wants to grab that land. Yeah.
Florida and Crimea, so he has this choice beachfront.
Right.
I wanted to ask you too, you had just done a huge, besides the interventions, you just done a huge event called Humanity for Peace. I think Reef still has the language on that, the poster. And I wanted to ask you how that went and who attended. And I did see some of the speeches. I saw Garland Nixon's. I saw some of them. So tell us how that went and what you thought.
Well, I was very happy about it. It had about the turnout I expected, which was a few hundred, maybe 500 at peak. rotating, through. But as one person who spoke there said, an Islamic Association leader, he said, I've been at rallies with 15,000 people. This rally, each of the speakers represented a significant constituency. You had a message of greeting, an endorsement sent by Bobby Kennedy Jr. You had the libertarian candidate for president, Mike Termott. You had a, maybe considered minor, but nonetheless the Republican Party candidate for president speaking. You had a leader of a Ghanaian, as in Guinea-Conakry, American Friendship Association, which has about 14,000 members in the New York City area, speak. You had someone who's running for president of Haiti. And then, as you mentioned, Garland Nixon, Scott Ritter, Gerald Celente. It represented much more than meets the eye. And I think in the United States right now, people may not fully appreciate the degree of fear to come to a rally because of these things, not only lists like this, but what happened in the wake of January 6th, where the FBI is still running around rounding up people whose faces appeared in videos and putting them under house arrest or things like that. I have friends who can't leave their state or community because they're in effect under house arrest because they went to the Capitol that day, whether or not, and did nothing in effect but being there. So that has put a huge chill. That's why I think what we saw in February at the Lincoln Memorial with, I think, about 3,500 people coming out actually was huge, represented much more than you would think, because these are people saying the risk of nuclear war is so great, I'm going to risk everything else. I'm going to stand out there. And so you could think of each one of them as having 10 or 20 or 30 people behind them in a sense.
Mm-hmm. It's been, and you've kind of watched me walk through the journey, because we met at Rage Against the War Machine in person. We'd known each other online, but then in person we got to hang out. And I had the opportunity to speak when Tucker Carlson still had his show, which was really an honor. And I got to talk about, my opposition to the proxy war the U.S. is fighting against Russia via Ukraine. You and I talked at length about where we're going as a country. And, we have the last few minutes of our show here. And I guess I wanted to give you the floor and just talk about some ideas that your movement has, and what because you're running again for Senate, and what your platform is and what you'd like to people to know.
Good. Well, I appreciate that, Tara. And I really appreciate your perspective, because I know that you were in the Senate and you have a sense of our government, and you're super on top of things, which is really makes it a pleasure to talk to you. I think that the biggest thing that's been kept from the American people is the shift in what you might call the global South. I had an interview with a young woman from South Africa who's she calls herself a nuclear power communicator. And I was so struck by her tone in the interview. And she told me she's a big advocate for nuclear power, and she travels all over the world. She was disappointed because she wanted to go see the Russian floating nuclear plant in Pevek, I think is the city. It's somewhere on the Arctic Circle. Yeah. And she said, unfortunately, you can't get back. You can fly there, but the flights coming back are full. So she had to wait to go visit this plant. But and she's talking to me from a blackout, because South Africa has rolling blackouts, and you have all these international NGOs coming in there advocating to shut down all the coal-fired power plants and not have nuclear power. And she said, when I was growing up, we had charcoal and dung. We cooked our food over a dung fire. She said, my father was in the liberation movement. My house was always getting shot up. And so then I said to her, are you familiar with Henry Kissinger and his NSSM 200, the study calling for depopulating 14 nations because we want to use their raw materials? We don't want them to become influential. And he called for forced sterilizations and using food as a weapon. And she said, well, no, I'm not familiar with that particular report, but it's not working. And it was just she said, our population is growing, and in 20 years, Africa is going to look completely different. And she said, we're not dumb over here. We read the alternative press. We know what they're trying to do. And it was so calm. It was not enraged. It was not victimized. It was just very matter of fact. And you see that attitude, with Victoria Nuland flying over to Niger, trying to throw her weight around, so
Literally.
to speak, and they wouldn't let her meet with the deposed president.
Mm-hmm.
They said no. I mean, whoever heard of that? How could the deputy secretary of state go somewhere and people have the temerity to say, no, sorry, you're not allowed to come to our country and do whatever you want? This is new. This is new. And I think
don't you think it's because Russia decided not to bend a knee and China is not bending a knee? And so they're emboldened. Yeah.
There's a new game in town. So you don't have to work with the bully who's going to poke your eyes out and kick you in the testicles. You have a different option. And then they look around the world and they say, oh my goodness, there's 140 nations in the Belt and Road. Mm-hmm. And so that's where you get, because what struck me with this young lady, she's not in government. She has an important job, speaking, but she's not in a power making or decision making position. But nonetheless, the confidence of their independence and the end of this colonial system just came through. And it really struck me. There's a whole dynamic in the world that Americans are not aware of. Right. And I think it might give people a glimmer of hope. Mm-hmm. And an idea that we shouldn't be groveling either. And you hear the tone, and they're bringing the migrants, and they're doing these terrible things, and they're taking our guns away, and that's true, but that doesn't mean you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Right? There's this victimized, whiny, scared tone, mm-hmm. which makes you impotent.
Right.
And what I heard from this young woman in Africa was none of that. It was just complete, but it's not working. We know what they want to do to us, but in other words, they have developed faith in themselves that they're not going to let it happen. And I think that's what we need in the United States. Americans have to have faith in ourselves that we're not going to let them do this to us anymore. We simply are not going to participate in our own oppression or the oppression of anyone else on the planet.
Well, that's great. And you know what? While you were talking, you just got a message from Roger Meadows. He says that he met you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, he met you. It says here, if you're talking to New Yorkers, he said, if you're not talking to New Yorkers statewide about, and the message cut off. Diane, I spoke to you briefly in New York City when you were hosting an event. Mm-hmm. And then anyway, he was going on, but he sent you a tip, and Roger Meadows sends you his regard. And
thank you.
And then I think we've just posted it. So yeah, I mean, that's really, that's really moving to hear. And I like the way you and I had talked about in 2019, we had talked about, I hadn't talked to you, but in 2019, I talked publicly, mm-hmm. and you were reflecting on that if Biden became president, he would go to war with Russia. And I said that there was going to be an alliance between Russia, China, and South Africa. What I didn't predict is that the whole continent of Africa would start waking up the way it is and punch out au revoir, right? And that's really nice, right?
Yes.
Isn't that's hope?
Yes, and also some of the women are so strong, like Pandor, the foreign minister of South Africa. She is incredible. I love watching her. Yeah. She had the guts when Tony Blinken was there by her side to say, we don't appreciate you coming here. We don't like to be bullied. I thought that was great.
He called him out. And he really, and he's just so used to getting like in Australia, they acted like a lapdog, and I think literally held a lapdog while they were standing next to, with Blinken, and making the deal about weapons going to Australia because of, they're now, poking at Taiwan. And basically Blinken just sat there and in Julian Assange's home country of Australia talked about extraditing him to the US under espionage charges, and how they're going to continue to do that and not drop the charges. It's it's outrageous and heartbreaking to see Julian Assange still imprisoned. And, I had hoped maybe with an election year, there would be some pressure.
Right.
They would drop the charges, but it looks like they've doubled down, doesn't it?
It does. And I think that was one of the biggest mistakes Trump made at the end of his term is, I don't know why Steve Bannon got a free pass and Julian Assange stayed in prison. That was completely the wrong choice.
Yeah.
I think Trump would be in much better shape now if Julian Assange had been freed.
Mhm.
Now, every time things go badly for Biden, it's, let's indict Donald Trump again. People would see, it would have been important. Similarly, Ed Snowden, similarly, as you know, I've been advocating for many years that LaRouche's name should be cleared because you have such a genius to have this cloud hanging over him so people never find out what he actually stood for. Is that it's not about him. He's deceased. It's about whether the American people are going to be allowed to own their legacy and their heritage and what we deserve as a nation.
Well, and I think that's a good point because, you're very inspiring to me because you've been able to, keep your candidacy going. You fought a lot of political battles and running for office against, the most powerful elite Democrats, that are of all time. And, and you've been, in my eyes, victorious in getting your message through. And what that's about too is you were talking about playing, the kind of the victim thing. It's good because people have asked me like, how do you move on or how do you whatever? Look, I know I'm not going to get justice. I was hoping to testify before Congress. I was really excited about that. And then it became obvious they were going to put me in a cage or kill me before I was going to be allowed to testify because I had corroborating evidence and it would have tanked at that moment their narrative. And plus, Matt Gaetz was trying to get my personnel file from the Senate and the Senate refused to give it. And then gave the excuse that I hadn't signed off on it. And so I signed off on it, still wouldn't give it, right? So they're hiding. And just like in that case, he's hiding with all this bribery and corruption case. So imagine what else is out there. Imagine like what else is out there. But what I did was I decided, no, I'm going to own the narrative. I'm not going to go slinking away and hide under a rock. Now I'm in Moscow, Russia. I'm free and I can get my message through. And I'm in a place where I'm not going to be impeded and I'm not going to be suppressed. And I know many Americans say I've been called a traitor. And I know that's been called by some, people call your group Putin puppets or whatever, and all these ridiculous Russophobic things. But the truth of the matter is Democrats have become the war party, in my opinion.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's both parties, really.
Party.
It really is. I mean, there's mavericks. I mean, look at Trump and Bobby Kennedy Jr. probably are the fronters in both parties, and they're both saying they're against the war. So, and both parties are trying to crush them.
Yeah, but then now Robert Kennedy has become like a walking billboard for Israel. So I don't know. That's
but I don't think that means they're not going to steal his vote and grind him into the dirt. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, they are going to do that, unfortunately.
Because you're not allowed to have a debate. You're not allowed to have a debate.
Right. No primaries, right? No primaries.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Now, how does that affect you? Are you going to have a debate of any kind? Are you going to be able to do any of that? Or is that like
Well, I'm sure they're going to try not to. We'll see. I'm going to have to jump through all these hurdles again. They're going to really try hard to keep me off the ballot this time, knowing that I succeeded last time. So I don't know. We'll be fighting for that. And I'm going to be, it's interesting, thanks to you and many other people, anti-war voices. I'm starting now from a platform I didn't have at the beginning of the Schumer campaign. So I have a lot more visibility, a lot more open support. They're going to have a much harder time suppressing me and acting as if I don't exist. So we'll see what happens. We'll see.
You are not invisible. We see you. We hear you. And that's the thing, and taking back the narrative. And that's the message. And I like your strong message. So how can people find you and help donate to your campaign and get involved and volunteer and
Well,
support
thank you. They can find my website is sareforsenate.com, S-A-R-E, just 4 letters, S-A-R-E, the word for, F-O-R, senate.com. You can sign up to get my emails. Please donate if you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. The funds determine everything. And as you might imagine, I am not a recipient of dark money, money from George Soros or the Ford Foundation. And I'm on Twitter and so far Facebook, and not using Telegram as much as I should. Rumble, not as much as I should, but I'm there. You can find me. And I just had a conversation with someone who's going to help me do a lot more on Instagram, which I have yet to figure out. I have an Instagram account, but I'm just, I don't know. It hasn't been my top priority. So
I hear you. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me. I know that you're in the middle of traveling. I know you're busy, and I really appreciate your time. And hopefully you're not in a hot car. Hopefully you have air conditioning there, and you're able to get on with your day. And thank you. As always, you present with such grace and such dignity and wisdom. It was really nice to talk with you and spend time with you.
Well, thank you so much. The feeling is mutual. Okay.
Oh, wait. Reef wants us to wait.
So
we have a question. What is it, Reef?
If I didn't actually ask the question. But he tipped a couple dollars on Rockfin to ask essentially, he wants to know what you're going to do specifically for New Yorkers, since you're running that area. He's from Long Island himself. And he feels like while all this foreign policy is important, it's not necessarily what New Yorkers are focused on. If you could speak to how you might.
Good, sure, I will. And Tara's right. I really have to run, but let me just say this very, very briefly. Actually, it's funny you should ask, because I just came from a meeting with a former state assembly leader who's now doing some work around various congressional offices, and we had a whole discussion about the transformation of the state of New York. Long Island is very important in the high-tech area, and we're building this new chips plant here. There's some other kinds of high-tech industry, but 157 New York companies are involved in Artemis, the space program, to land the first woman on the moon. Hopefully, it was supposed to have been 2024. It's now been pushed back under Biden. But when you have these kind of programs, and otherwise, New York is headed for blackouts by 2025 because we shut down Indian Point, and then the crazy governor said we can't have gas. We can't have gas either, so there's no replacement, and we're going to have solar panels and windmills. So New York is facing the prospects of brownouts and blackouts in 2025. But there's a lot moving with the potential for fusion with some top research in the state. I think that should be funded. I think we have to build the partnerships between the universities and these incredible facilities that are making scientific breakthroughs. And I think that will help change the culture of New York. Also, magnetically levitated rail was invented at Brookhaven. We never built an inch of it. They sold the patent to the Japanese willingly, because the Japanese said, you're not building it, would you sell us the patent? We did. They'd love to come here and help finance and help us build maglev rail, which would create thousands of jobs. So this is some of what I would do. As you know, Senator, I'm a US Senator, so it's national and federal policy, of which foreign policy is very important. But there's a lot that our state can do for the development of the nation, which would also benefit our state greatly. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Diane. That was a very good answer. And good luck on your travels. And we got another $100 tip from Aram, and he asked me to take Rella to lunch. And it's AREM is who sent it. And take Fiorella to lunch, or Reefer, he called you.
You're going to have a good lunch.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, you take good care, Diane. We'll see you next time. And to everyone who's listening, I want to thank you so much for joining the show tonight. We'll be back it's tonight to me, tomorrow. I mean, today for you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we will see you next time on the Politics of Survival. Please support Independent News Network. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye. Did you find it?